ladies and emperors, I just got back from Venice, and boy, are my arms tired.
Mel Brooks is a living legend, a true giant of comedy, and one of Hollywood's most unforgettable filmmakers. At the age of 98, he's lived a life filled with laughter, success, and creativity. He gave us some of the funniest films in movie history like Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, Spaceballs, and The Producers. For decades, he turned chaos into comedy, and now, with nothing left to prove, he's looking back and sharing stories from his long career. And when asked about the 6 actors he hated working with, he didn't hold back. But let's be clear, this is Mel Brooks we're talking about. His idea of hating someone is very different from what most people mean. For Mel, hate often meant love with frustration, admiration mixed with madness. It meant that these actors drove him crazy, tested his patience, made filming difficult, but also helped create magic on screen. These weren't enemies. They were brilliant performers who made his job both harder and more rewarding. Mel's list is part confession, part comedy roast, and part tribute to the unforgettable personalities who helped shape his iconic films. The first name on the list is someone fans know, Weldon DeLucy. Dom was a beloved actor, known for his warm smile, big heart, and of course, his uncontrollable laughter. Mel didn't hate him because he was difficult in a mean way. He didn't throw tantrums or demand special treatment. In fact, he was one of the kindest and funniest people Mel had ever met. But that was the problem, he was too funny. Dom would laugh constantly. He'd break into giggles in the middle of scenes. He'd ruin takes by laughing before the camera even started rolling. For a director like Mel Brooks, who was trying to run a tight ship, Dom's non-stop laughter was both a blessing and a curse. Mel said, working with Dom was like trying to direct a child in a candy store, to much excitement, to little focus. Whenever Dom was on set, things would slow down. They'd have to shoot scenes 5, 6, even 10 times just to get one clean take. Mel once shared a story about History of the World, Part 1, where Dom had just one line. But when fellow actress Madeline Kahn gave him a look, just an innocent look, Dom lost it. He laughed so hard that he couldn't speak for 45 minutes. The entire crew had to stop everything and wait for him to calm down. Even though it was frustrating, Mel couldn't stay mad for long. Dom's joy was infectious. His timing, energy, and charm made every scene better. In films like Silent Movie, Spaceballs, and Robin Hood, Men in Tights, Dom brought life and laughter to the screen in a way few others could. He made everyone around him feel happy. Off camera, he was just as generous. He loved to cook and would often bring big trays of pasta to the set, feeding the crew and making everyone feel like family. Mel joked that he yelled "cut" more times with Dom than with any other actor, and that it was almost always Dom's fault. But he also admitted that once they finally got a usable take, it was comedy gold. Mel described their relationship like this: Dom brought chaos, and Mel wanted control. They were total opposites, but somehow, that mix worked. Dom made Mel's job harder, but he also made the movies better. That's why he's on the list. Not because Mel truly hated him, but because he was so wonderfully impossible to work with. Next on the list is someone who had a different kind of energy, Madeline Kahn. If Dom brought joyful chaos, Madeline brought controlled perfectionism. She was smart, talented, and had a gift for comedic timing that few could match. But she was also demanding, opinionated, and had very specific ideas about how things should be done. Mel worked with Madeline on many films, including Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, High Anxiety, and History of the World, Part 1. Each time, she delivered brilliant performances. But behind the scenes, things weren't always smooth. Madeline cared deeply about every detail. She didn't just show up, read her lines, and go home. She questioned everything. If something in the script didn't feel right, she asked for a rewrite. If her costume didn't match the tone of the scene, she brought it up. She wanted the best out of every scene, every shot, every line, and she wasn't afraid to speak her mind. Mel remembered how she often arrived late to set. The cameras would be ready, the crew in place, and everyone would be waiting. Then Madeline would walk in calm, confident, acting like everything was perfectly on time. It drove Mel crazy. But the moment the camera started rolling, all that frustration disappeared. She would deliver her lines perfectly, often in new and unexpected ways. In Blazing Saddles, she played Lily Von Stupp, the tired lounge singer with dramatic flair. The role became a classic. But Mel said, filming those scenes nearly gave him a heart attack. Madeline kept changing how she performed, trying new deliveries, rewriting her own dialogue, and even suggesting changes for the other actors. Mel once asked her to perform a line exactly as they had rehearsed it. She refused, saying she found a better way, and, to his annoyance, she was right. She made the scene better. This pattern continued in Young Frankenstein, where she played Elizabeth, the spoiled fiancée. Again, she nailed the role, but again, it came with endless debates, extra takes, and changes on the fly. Crew members noticed it too. Some called her a genius. Others quietly said she was exhausting. Mel once joked that directing her felt like wrestling a cat in a rainstorm. Still, he kept casting her. That said everything. He could have chosen easier actors, but he always came back to Madeline. She brought something special, something that couldn't be taught. Her instincts were sharp, her performances unforgettable. Mel said she had a way of making every scene about her character. She fought for her voice to be heard, and sometimes that led to clashes. But when the final film was edited and ready to be seen, Madeline's choices often made the difference between good and great. Mel Brooks didn't stop there. The third actor on his list of difficult collaborators was none other than Gene Hackman. Now, this one might surprise people, because Gene Hackman is one of the most respected actors in Hollywood history. He's known for powerful, serious roles, and he brought a lot of that dramatic skill to his one and only collaboration with Mel Brooks in Young Frankenstein. Hackman played the blind hermit in a memorable scene where he meets Frankenstein's monster. The scene is a classic. It's heartfelt, awkward, and hilarious. But behind the scenes, Mel remembered it differently. According to him, Gene Hackman was intense, very intense. He wasn't a comedian by trade. He came from a world of dramatic acting, and he took his craft very seriously. When he showed up on Mel's set, he came prepared, focused, and ready to act. And that's exactly what made things difficult. Mel said that working with Gene was like trying to do comedy inside a pressure cooker. Gene wasn't trying to be funny, he was trying to be truthful. And while that's a great trait for most actors, it clashed with Mel's fast-paced, loose, and often improvisational style. Gene wanted structure. Mel wanted freedom. The result was tension. Mel joked that directing Gene was like asking a symphony conductor to play jazz on the fly. Gene didn't like surprises. He didn't laugh easily. He didn't want to try the scene just one more way. As Mel often asked, he wanted to get it right the first time, and in his mind, right meant sticking to the plan. But to be fair, Gene Hackman didn't cause chaos. He wasn't late. He wasn't unprofessional. He just had a different approach. Mel admitted that part of the problem was him. He was used to working with comedians who were loose, silly, and open to last-minute changes. Gene Hackman brought intensity and seriousness that Mel wasn't expecting. And even though the final scene turned out beautifully, one of the most memorable parts of the film getting there wasn't easy. Mel remembered asking Gene to try something more exaggerated, more physical, more over the top. Gene resisted. He wanted to keep it grounded. Mel pushed, Gene pushed back, and though they got through it, Mel walked away feeling both impressed and exhausted. Still, even with the tension, Mel had deep respect for Gene's talent. He said Gene was brilliant, committed, and professional. But the energy was just too different. He wasn't a nightmare, Mel said. He was just working in another universe. And that's why Gene Hackman made the list, not because he was bad, but because he made comedy feel like hard labor. He was too serious for Mel's wild world. One scene was all they ever did together, and Mel never invited him back, not because he didn't like him, but because he didn't think they could survive a full movie together. The fourth name on the list took things in a very different direction. Harvey Korman. Now, this one really stung for Mel, because he and Harvey had a long working relationship. Harvey starred in Blazing Saddles, High Anxiety, and History of the World. Part I, he was a comedy pro, someone with great timing and a wonderful stage presence. But according to Mel, Harvey had one major flaw: he was too good. That's right, he was so good that he made everyone else, including Mel, feel like they had to catch up. Harvey knew how funny he was, and that confidence sometimes turned into arrogance. He could be picky, he could be moody, and when things didn't go his way, he let everyone know. Mel said that Harvey had moments where he'd question the script, roll his eyes at certain jokes, or suggest that something could be done better by him. There were days when Harvey walked onto set and acted like he was the director. He'd give advice to other actors, comment on camera angles, and sometimes push back on Mel's choices. At first, Mel found it helpful, but after a while, it got under his skin. It's hard to direct a guy who thinks he's already directing himself, Mel once joked. Still, Mel admitted that Harvey was incredibly talented. When the camera rolled, he delivered gold. But getting him to that point often meant dealing with drama, delays, and disagreements. The tension peaked during History of the World. Part 1. When Harvey insisted on rewriting several of his lines. Mel pushed back, saying the jokes were already funny. Harvey disagreed. They went back and forth for days. Finally, they shot the scene both ways. Mel used Harvey's version in the final cut, and to Mel's surprise, it worked. But even then, Mel admitted that working with Harvey felt like trying to wrestle with your own shadow. You respect it, you need it, but it never quite listens to you. Still, their friendship endured. Mel said that even though Harvey made him crazy, he never doubted his brilliance. And that's why Harvey Korman made the list, not because he was difficult for the sake of being difficult, but because he challenged Mel in ways that were both frustrating and unforgettable. Mel Brooks continued down his unforgettable list with someone who brought elegance, attitude, and a whole lot of flair: Cloris Leachman to the audience. she was a powerhouse performer. Her role as Frau Blucher in Young Frankenstein became instantly iconic. Every time her name was mentioned in the movie, horses would whinny and fear a running joke that fans still laugh at today. But while the joke was funny on screen, the experience behind the scenes was more complicated. Mel described Cloris as one of the most intense actresses he'd ever worked with. She was incredibly focused, emotionally involved in every scene, and very aware of how she wanted things to be. And like Madeline Kahn, she didn't hesitate to speak her mind. Cloris had her own rhythm. She didn't rush. She didn't compromise easily. When she stepped into a scene, she took her time, examined every line, and expected everyone to be working at the same high level as she was. This often led to clashes with Mel, who preferred a faster, more flexible style of directing. He liked to try things on the fly, to make small changes in the moment, and to keep the energy flowing. Cloris, on the other hand, needed time to absorb the scene. She needed preparation. She wasn't comfortable winging it, especially in comedy. Mel remembered that during Young Frankenstein, Cloris would stop scenes midway to ask about her motivation. She would question if a line truly fit her character. Mel respected her dedication, but he also admitted it slowed things down. She took comedy seriously, he said, and sometimes, a little too seriously. But just like the others on the list, Cloris delivered. When the cameras rolled, her performance was electric. Her facial expressions, her timing, was all perfect. She could say one word and make an entire audience laugh. Mel described her as someone who could steal a scene without even trying. And while that kind of talent is rare, it also came with its own challenges. Cloris was passionate, driven, and unwilling to settle. Mel said she made him shoot scenes over and over until she felt it was right, even if he already liked the first take. There were moments when he felt exhausted, mentally drained by her perfectionism. But when he watched the final cut, he couldn't deny that she was right. Her insistence on detail made the film better. Still, Mel joked that if he had $1 for every time he and Cloris argued on set, he'd be richer than the studio that funded the movie. Their working relationship was a mix of fire and admiration. They didn't always get along, but they respected each other deeply. Cloris didn't back down. Mel didn't either. They were both strong personalities, which led to a lot of creative tension. But in the end, that tension created some of the most memorable scenes in comedy history. Mel said that Cloris reminded him of a sculptor, always chiseling away at her role until it was just right. It was exhausting, but it was also brilliant. That's why she made the list. Not because Mel disliked her, but because she pushed him harder than almost anyone else ever had. Then came a name that truly shocked people: Teri Garr. She had a small but powerful role in Young Frankenstein, playing Inga, the beautiful lab assistant with a quirky sense of humor. Her chemistry with Gene Wilder was undeniable, and her comedic timing added so much charm to the film. But behind the charm, Mel said, was a sharp mind and a stubborn will. Teri was relatively new to Mel's team when she joined the cast, but she quickly made her presence known. She wasn't loud or dramatic, but she had strong opinions, and she knew what she wanted. Mel said she was very careful about how her character was portrayed. She wanted Inga to be more than just eye candy. She wanted her to be smart, witty, and an important part of the story. And to her credit, she succeeded. However, Mel admitted that working with Teri sometimes felt like walking on eggshells. She was particular about her lines, her wardrobe, and her interactions with other characters. She didn't like to be rushed, and she wasn't afraid to push back if something didn't feel right. Mel remembered one scene where he asked her to deliver a joke in a more exaggerated way. Teri disagreed, saying it didn't fit the tone of her character. They went back and forth for nearly an hour. Eventually, they shot it both ways, and once again, Teri's version made it into the final cut. Mel praised her instincts, but also said that moments like that wore him down. She wasn't loud, he said, but she was firm, and when she dug her heels in, there was no moving her. Despite the friction, Mel admired Teri's intelligence and her dedication to her role. He said she brought a level of thoughtfulness to the set that made everyone take their work more seriously. She didn't joke around as much as the others, but when she did, it was always perfectly timed. Mel described her as a quiet force of presence that couldn't be ignored. She may not have been as openly chaotic as Dom or as boldly opinionated as Madeline, but she left just as big of a mark. And while she only worked with Mel on one film, that short collaboration was enough to leave a lasting impression. She made the list, not because she was disruptive, but because she was quietly relentless in her pursuit of doing the role her way. Finally, the last name on Mel's list brought everything full circled in: Wilder. This one was the hardest to talk about, because Gene wasn't just a collaborator. He was a friend, a partner, and in many ways, a comedic soulmate. They worked together on multiple projects, including The Producers, Blazing Saddles, and Young Frankenstein, which they co-wrote together. Gene had a brilliant mind, a gentle heart, and a unique way of delivering humor that felt both silly and profound at the same time. But even with all that love and respect, Mel admitted that Gene could be incredibly difficult to work with. Why? Because Gene was a perfectionist in his own quiet way. He didn't explode or argue. He didn't demand the spotlight, but he had a deep emotional connection to every scene, and if something didn't feel right, he couldn't let it go. Mel said that Gene would sometimes walk off set in frustration, not with others, but with himself. He wanted to give the best performance possible, and when he didn't feel he'd done that, he took it personally. Mel remembered nights when he and Gene stayed up rewriting scenes, talking through character motivations, and debating the smallest details. It was exhausting, but it was also beautiful. Gene's passion for storytelling matched Mel's in every way, and while that passion sometimes made the process harder, it also made the results unforgettable. Mel said that he and Gene would argue like brothers. They'd get upset, take breaks, cool off, and then come back and create something wonderful. One of the most emotional moments for Mel was working with Gene on Young Frankenstein. It was a labor of love, but also a test of their friendship. They debated every joke, every shot, every moment, and yet, the final product was a masterpiece. Mel admitted that Gene pushed him more than anyone else, and even though it was frustrating, it was also inspiring. Gene didn't let me take shortcuts. Mel said he made me work for it, and because of that, the work was better. That's why Gene Wilder makes the list, not because he was hard to love, but because he made every step of the journey more intense, more emotional, and more personal. Now, at 98, Mel Brooks looks back at these 6 actors with a mix of exhaustion, admiration, and deep affection. He says he hated working with them, but always with a smile. Because in the world of Mel Brooks, hate doesn't mean dislike. It means they made him sweat, think, push harder, and grow. They brought trouble, sure, but they also brought genius. Each of them made Mel's life more complicated, and each of them helped make his films timeless. And that's the beautiful contradiction of show business. Sometimes, the hardest people to work with are the ones you can't imagine living without. These 6 actors weren't Mel's enemies. They were his greatest creative challenges and his greatest rewards. When you think about Mel Brooks, you think about laughter, chaos, and creative freedom. His sets were loud, fun, and full of wild ideas that often led to comedy gold. But not every actor enjoyed that environment. One surprising name on Mel's list of challenging collaborators is Gene Hackman. Gene was an incredible actor, best known for his serious roles in powerful dramas. When he joined the cast of Young Frankenstein, he played the blind hermit in one of the movie's most iconic scenes. The scene became famous for its mix of physical comedy, timing, and unexpected tenderness. It made audiences laugh for decades. But Mel later shared that making that scene wasn't as funny as watching it. Gene Hackman was known for being deeply serious about his work. He didn't like messing around. He came to set prepared and focused, expecting everyone else to treat the project with the same seriousness. That attitude clashed with Mel's way of working, which was much more relaxed and Mel liked to shoot fast and loose. He encouraged actors to improvise, try silly ideas, and change things even during filming. Gene didn't like that at all. He wanted clear instructions and consistency. He believed in rehearsing carefully and repeating the same actions until they were perfect. Mel found that style hard to work with. He said Gene wasn't rude, just intense. On a set where everyone else was joking and laughing, Gene stayed in character and focused. He didn't laugh at the bloopers. He didn't enjoy retakes caused by others laughing too much. He stayed quiet, serious, and very professional. Mel respected that, but he also felt frustrated. Their creative rhythms didn't match. Mel later described it like trying to play jazz with someone reading music, note by note. Even though the final result was amazing and audiences loved Gene's performance, the experience was difficult. After Young Frankenstein, they never worked together again. Mel admitted it wasn't personal. It just didn't make sense. Gene liked control. Mel liked freedom, and both knew their styles weren't a good match. Mel said he admired Gene's brilliance but felt the process of filming with him was like walking on a tightrope full of tension. He never regretted working with Gene, but he also never forgot how exhausting it was. Another name on Mel's list was Cloris Leachman. Unlike Gene Hackman, Cloris wasn't cold or overly serious. She was the opposite. She was loud, bold, curious, and full of questions. Mel called her one of the finest actors he ever worked with, but she also gave him more headaches than almost anyone else. Cloris didn't take direction quietly. When Mel gave her a note, she didn't just say okay. She asked why, over and over again. She wanted to understand every line, every movement, every emotion. She would debate with Mel on set like it was a college class. She questioned everything until she believed in what she was doing. This approach slowed things down. Mel said she was like a wild horse, powerful and focused, but impossible to control. She had her own ideas about how her characters should behave. In Young Frankenstein, she played Frau Blucher, the strange and spooky housekeeper. The role became legendary, but Cloris wanted to make her character darker and more serious. Mel wanted her to be funny, odd, and warm. They disagreed constantly. The arguments were never loud or angry, just constant. Mel would say one thing, Cloris would push back. They would try both versions and pick what worked best. Sometimes Cloris was right. Sometimes Mel had to beg her to try his way. But in the end, the results were brilliant. The same thing happened in High Anxiety, where Cloris played Nurse Diesel. She wanted more control. Mel wanted more chaos. Their personalities kept clashing. Mel admitted that Cloris wore him down, not with shouting, but with endless questions. He said after a day of filming with her, he needed a nap. Off camera, they were friendly but distant. They respected each other but never got close. Cloris was in her own world, full of thoughts and ideas. Mel admired her commitment. She didn't care about screen time or praise. She only cared about the truth of her character. That kind of dedication made her unforgettable, but also exhausting. Then there was Richard Pryor, one of the greatest comedians of all time. When Mel started working on Blazing Saddles, he wanted Richard to play the lead role. Richard was smart, fearless, and knew how to use comedy to fight injustice. He helped write the script, and his ideas shaped the film's bold and risky humor. But when it came time to cast him, the studio said no. They were afraid. Richard had a wild reputation. He missed meetings. He struggled with addiction. The studio didn't trust him to be reliable. Mel was furious. He fought for Richard, but lost. Richard stayed on as a writer, but didn't act in the film. Mel always said the movie wouldn't have been the same without Richard's influence. He never hated Richard. He hated the system that pushed him out. What Mel Brooks learned from these experiences is something every creator can understand. Not every great actor is easy to work with. Sometimes, the most brilliant people are also the most challenging. They question everything. They fight for their vision. They bring intensity, passion, and sometimes, chaos. But they also create unforgettable moments. Mel's work with Gene Hackman showed him how two very different styles can clash and still produce magic. Gene's seriousness brought depth to a silly scene. His precision made the comedy sharper, even though the process was hard. Mel admitted that the final result was worth the struggle. With Cloris Leachman, the lesson was about patience. She pushed Mel to think harder about his choices. She didn't let anything slide. Her constant questions made the work stronger. Mel may have felt exhausted, but he also knew she made the film better. And with Richard Pryor, Mel saw how talent can be blocked by fear. The studio's decision to remove Richard from the lead role of Blazing Saddles showed how the industry often chooses safety over brilliance. Mel never forgot how unfair that felt. He knew Richard was the heart of the film, even if he wasn't its star. Mel's reflections at 98 are not full of bitterness. He doesn't name these actors out of spite. He talks about them with deep respect, even love. What he struggled with was not who they were, was how hard it was to make their styles fit. With his, he once said that great comedy often comes from great tension. And that's clear in every story he shares. Whether it's arguing with Cloris about how to say a single line, or watching Gene Hackman stay completely serious while everyone else giggled, Mel knew that these moments shaped his career. They made the films better, even when they made the days longer. These were not feuds, they were creative battles. And in those battles, Mel found greatness not because it was easy, but because it was real. In the end, he didn't hate these actors. He hated the stress, the friction, the slowdowns, but he also cherished what came out of them. At 98, Mel Brooks looks back and remembers not just the laughter, but the lessons. And maybe that's the biggest punchline of all sometimes. The people who test your limits are the ones who leave the deepest impact. They shape the art, challenge the ego, and remind us that even comedy comes with a price. But if that price is brilliance, then maybe it's all worth it. Mel Brooks, the comedy legend known for films like Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, has had a long, colorful career in Hollywood. At 98, he's not afraid to speak his mind. He recently opened up about the 6 actors he hated working with the most, but in Mel's case, hate doesn't mean dislike. It means they drove him crazy in the best and worst ways. The first name on that list is one of the greatest comedians of all time, Richard Pryor. Mel wanted Richard to star as Bart in Blazing Saddles. He believed Richard's energy and wildness would be perfect, but the studio said no. They thought Richard was too risky and predictable and unstable. It broke Mel's heart. Even Richard, who had helped write the script, understood the decision, but it hurt. He had put so much of his creativity and time into it, only to be sidelined. Instead, Mel cast Clavin Little, who did a fantastic job bringing style, timing, and control to the role. Still, Mel always wondered what the film would have been like with Richard as the lead. He believed Richard had something dangerous in his eyes, something unpredictable, something real. Richard wasn't easy to work with. He was sometimes late, 2 writing sessions, and sometimes he didn't show up at all. His moods changed quickly. One day, he'd be full of energy and jokes. The next, he'd be silent or missing entirely. Mel compared it to waiting for lightning. You couldn't control it, but when it hit, it was magical. Despite the chaos, Richard's writing helped shape the entire tone of Blazing Saddles. He brought a bold, raw truth that made the movie powerful and unforgettable. Mel never stopped admiring his genius, even though it came with a storm. He said Richard lived in his own world, one full of brilliance, but also filled with pain. And though Mel wanted to help him, he also needed someone dependable for the lead role, especially during a big production. Letting Richard go was one of Mel's biggest regrets. Even though Richard's face wasn't on screen, his fingerprints were all over the film. His ideas, his voice, his courage, it all stayed in the final cut. They remained friends, and Mel never held a grudge. He respected Richard too much. He saw him, not just as a comedian, but as an artist, someone whose talent couldn't be contained by movie sets or strict rules. But Mel also saw how hard that freedom could be. The next name on the list is someone even more personal in Bancroft, Mel's wife of more than 40 years. Mel always said she was the most difficult actor he ever worked with, but also the one he loved the most. Anne was strong, sharp, and never afraid to speak her mind. They worked together on To Be or Not to Be, a movie set during World War II that mixed comedy, drama, and politics. Mel starred in it and also directed, while Anne played the female lead. You'd think it would be smooth sailing for a husband and wife duo, but the reality was very different. Anne didn't hold back. If she didn't like a line, she said so. If she didn't agree with a scene, she made her opinion clear, sometimes with just a look. Mel admitted she scared him a little. Not because she was mean, but because she was always one step ahead. She treated him like an equal, not a director. Their arguments on set were never cruel, but they were intense. Anne pushed back against anything that didn't feel true to the character. Mel would ask for more emotion, and Anne would stare at him and ask, what kind of emotion? She made him work harder, think deeper. Mel once joked that she was the only actress who could make him rewrite scenes just with a glance. The tension on set was real, but the result was beautiful. Anne brought elegance and strength to the film. She had a gift for finding truth in every line, even when the dialogue was silly. She didn't play for laughs, she played for honesty. And that made the funny parts even better. When the cameras stopped rolling, they didn't carry the fights home, they went back to being a couple. Mel would make her tea, and she'd ask about his day. But once they were back on set, it was game on. Mel always joked about how hard she was to direct, but he also called her the most brilliant, beautiful, and powerful woman he had ever met. Anne pushed Mel to be his best. She didn't let him settle for less. And though their work together was full of friction, it was also full of love and trust. Mel said she was the only one who could truly challenge him, and that made her unforgettable. The third actor, Mel Brooks, hated working with is someone who made him laugh more than anyone else, Dom DeLuise. Dom was a comedic genius with a big heart and a bigger laugh. But that laugh was both his gift and his curse on set. Mel would often say that Dom just couldn't keep it together. He'd start laughing in the middle of scenes, sometimes at his own jokes, sometimes at others. He just couldn't stop. It wasn't just the actors losing it. Dom's laugh was so contagious that the whole crew would burst into laughter, ruining take after take. Mel would get frustrated, not because Dom wasn't talented, but because it made filming so difficult. Every time they tried to shoot a serious or timed scene, Dom's laughter would throw everything off. But when the camera finally captured the magic, when Dom stayed in character long enough, it was unforgettable. Mel admitted that despite the chaos, Dom brought joy and heart to every project. He was lovable, hilarious, and full of energy. Even though Mel hated the delays, he loved Dom deeply. He brought warmth and silliness to Mel's films that no one else could. Mel once said that working with Dom felt like trying to wrestle a bear covered in feathers. You couldn't win, but you'd laugh the whole time. The fourth actor on Mel's list is Madeline Kahn, a true star of Mel Brooks movies. She was clever, elegant, and incredibly funny, but also not afraid to challenge every word on the page. Madeline was known for questioning lines, dissecting scenes, and asking for changes until she felt everything was just right. Mel admired her mind, but her constant feedback made filming difficult. She had high standards and was never afraid to speak up. Mel would write a joke he thought was perfect, and Madeline would pause, look at him, and say, "You sure about that?" Just like that, Mel would start rewriting. She wasn't trying to make things harder, she just cared deeply about the work. Her performances were always worth it. From Blazing Saddles to Young Frankenstein, Madeline brought life to every role. She had perfect timing and incredible control, making even the most ridiculous scenes believable. Mel said working with her was like playing chess with a grandmaster. You had to think ahead, you had to be ready, and you had to respect the game. Her passion sometimes drove him crazy, but it also made the films better. Then there was Cloris Leachman, the perfectionist. Cloris was deeply talented and always gave 100%, but she obsessed over the smallest details. She asked about lighting, costume fabric, the meaning of every line, and even how long her character should pause between words. Mel said Cloris had more notes than he didn't. He was the director. She challenged him constantly, making scenes take longer and giving everyone extra work. But in the end, she was right most of the time. In Young Frankenstein, she turned a small role into one of the film's most memorable characters. Her dedication to every scene made the movie shine. Mel might have grumbled at her long list of requests, but he always admitted she was a powerhouse. Cloris didn't settle for good enough. She chased greatness, and she expected everyone else to do the same. Mel said she drove him up the wall, but her work made the whole film stronger. That's the theme across all these hated actors. None of them were bad at their jobs. In fact, they were brilliant. They just made Mel work harder. They challenged him, pushed him, and sometimes exhausted him. But they also helped create some of the greatest comedy moments in movie history. Whether it was Madeline asking tough questions, Dom laughing through every take, or Cloris rewriting the rules. Mel came to appreciate that what frustrated him most also made the movies unforgettable. He didn't really hate them. He hated how hard it was to keep up with their brilliance. And that kind of hate is really just a disguised kind of love. The final actor on Mel Brooks' list might surprise many people. Gene Hackman, known for his serious roles and intense acting style, Gene wasn't someone most fans associate with Mel's wild comedies. But when he did work with Mel, his approach brought an entirely new kind of challenge. Gene was, in Mel's words, too serious. While Mel liked creative chaos and wild jokes, Gene brought a method actor's mindset to every scene. He wanted to know his character's backstory. He asked questions about motivation. He wanted everything to make deep sense of it in a movie filled with ridiculous humor. Mel once said, Gene would ask me why his character was doing something, and I'd have to tell him because it's funny. Gene took everything personally, deeply, and with intense focus. That intensity sometimes clashed with Mel's more playful approach. Mel needed actors who could improvise and roll with the madness. Gene wanted structure. He came to set like he was preparing for a dramatic war film, even if the script was full of jokes. This difference in styles made working together difficult. But Mel admitted something important: Gene's seriousness actually made the comedy even better. His grounded performance gave the silliness around him more weight. He was the straight man in a circus of clowns, and that contrast made audiences laugh harder. Mel said Gene was tough to direct, but his professionalism and talent brought something truly unique to the films. In the end, all 6 actors on Mel Brooks' hate list were some of the most talented people he ever worked with. And the truth is, Mel didn't hate them at all, not really. What he hated was how much they challenged him, how hard they pushed back, how much they forced him to rethink everything. But that's also why he respected them. Mel built his career on creative madness. He never wanted calm, boring film. Says he wanted the chaos, the magic that comes when great minds collide. These actors brought that magic. Dom DeLuise made everyone laugh uncontrollably. Madeline Kahn refused to accept anything less than excellence. Cloris Leachman paid attention to every detail. Gene Hackman brought gravity. Richard Pryor wrote with fire. And Anne Bancroft challenged him in love and in art. Mel said, "These people drove me nuts, but they made my movies great." To him, hate was a kind of backhanded compliment. It meant they left a mark. They weren't forgettable, they weren't easy, but they were essential. They helped him make comedy history. And even at 98, Mel Brooks still remembers every frustrating moment because those moments became legendary scenes that audiences still enjoy today. So when Mel uses the word hate, he really means admiration. He means respect. He means love in its rawest, most creative form. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. The people who push us the hardest are often the ones who help us create our best work. So, which of these actors surprised you the most? Was it Richard's chaotic genius, Anne's fierce love, or Gene's serious style? No matter who you pick, one thing is clear: Mel Brooks' legacy wouldn't be the same without them. And maybe, just maybe, being on Mel's hate list is the biggest compliment of all.